gentlemen, welcome to this brand new episode of the Jedi Way here on the Outlaw Nation channel. I am the Outlaw, also known as Rocha Fett here. Very excited to be joined by these two wonderful people to talk about all the stuff that's going on in the world of Star Wars. First up, the co-host of Force Toast Pod, co-host of this show as well, and one of the most steeped and learned people in Star Wars, and who's out here picking fights on Twitter. I love it. Laura Kelly, how are you?
I'm doing amazing. It's been a great week, honestly. I'm also like on Twitter trying to dodge all these Ted Lasso spoilers. I had to actually like come home and just bunker down and watch the episode. I'm like, I would have liked to have waited, watched on my own time. Right. But no, Twitter's like, no, you need to watch it now. It's going to get spoiled. So here we are.
Where would you put Ted Lasso? Is Ted Lasso a Jedi or is Ted Lasso a council member? Where's Ted Lasso? Is he one of the senators?
I would say, yeah, Jedi are like one of the very benevolent senators, like somewhere in like Bail Organa's crew. I don't know. What do you think, Kevin?
I'm thinking a pod race aficionado.
Ooh.
Yeah, and then that game where all the robots are playing football in the background of the Attack of the Clones Club, the Outlander or whatever.
I'm familiar.
He's a coach for one of those teams.
That's it. Nailed it.
Well, you heard his dulcet tones, and he is officially a member of the Jedi Way. We're so very excited to welcome one of the founders of Scoundrels, Inc., but now on our show full-time, the great Kevin Smets. How are you, Smets?
I'm good. I'm proud to be on a show that ends with a Qui-Gon Jinn quote, because that's my favorite Jedi of all time. So happy to be here. That was actually the tipping point in our negotiations. I said, as long as Laura keeps making that quote at the end. So
yeah,
that was a John find, by the way. That wasn't me. I just get to read it.
Oh wow, yeah. So Qui-Gon's my favorite. Although there's a funny video where it says how Qui-Gon's the worst Jedi ever, and it's the Cantina theme. And it talks about like credits will do fine. And it's like credits won't do fine. And then I sense a trap. I don't sense anything. And then he gets stabbed. And they're like, yeah, so he might be the worst Jedi ever, but he's my favorite Jedi.
I love him. He's a good guy. All right, we're going to jump into so many things going on in the world of Star Wars here, including some rumors about some productions maybe being altered or delayed or postponed for a bit because of the writer's strike. We're also going to get into all the stuff that dropped in the Empire magazine, because that dropped. We're on our, we do the show every couple of weeks. So when we were on our break last week, it dropped this 20-page spread in Empire magazine. And the big one is talking about whether Heir to the Empire is actually the title of the Dave Filoni movie, or if it isn't. A lot of warring factions here. The galactic, it's going crazy in the galaxy right now about whether that's true or not. I want to encourage you all, before we start, to please subscribe to the channel, ladies and gentlemen, and follow these two wonderful people on their social media, as you can see right there on the screen as well. All right, Miss Kelly, where shall we go first?
I mean, I think we should start with this Empire magazine article, because honestly, I don't want to call it old news, but you guys, it was kind of a lot of like old news. Like these articles should have all come out like right after Celebration. So like, what is this?
And it's a British magazine, and it was held in London. Why was there a delay? That's a great point, Laura. Yeah.
That's my question. But I will say that out of all the different things that they featured, which, there are pages on Ahsoka and Andor and Filoni's movie, and Katie Sackhoff did a whole interview with them. And there's a lot of great content in it. And I love the photos, I have to say. And I think these were taken at Star Wars Celebration too. I'm like, where was this like set where we're doing this photo shoot? Like it's really beautiful, honestly. But kind of for me, like the only sort of new information, or at least the information that I wasn't super familiar with in here, was like about the Acolyte. And I went to the High Republic panel and the Lucasfilm showcase where they talked about the Acolyte, and this still seemed like either information I did not retain from those two panels, or a lot of new information, which is really exciting. So maybe we start there, and then we can get your guys' thoughts on maybe some of these other articles in here within the Star Wars segment.
Yeah, I mean, I loved a lot of what they said about the Acolyte. Seemed like a really unusual approach to a show. Once again, something different, something expanding the brand of franchise, expanding the franchise of Star Wars, expanding what it can be. I mean, CSI Jedi, you had me at CSI Jedi. I mean, really just the idea of them exploring this as a mystery they need to solve, and what's going on, who do they trust somebody when they tell them they didn't do it, all these questions and what have you. I love that you got this aspect to it all, but of course the different ages of these characters as well, the different experiences and what they're all going to be bringing to the overall main storyline. It really stood out to me. What about you, Kevin? What'd you take away from that thing?
I just think it's funny, all these like compare. It's CSI Jedi, and they said it's Kill Bill meets Disney's Frozen, like, oh,
yeah.
It's like No Country for Old Men meets Snow White, and Here's a Lion King mixed with When Harry Met Sally. It's going to be so fantastic. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. My favorite thing is it's going to be taking place before, Phantom Menace, like over a century. I guess that's the info I see here. So that just really, look at a Yoda. We're going to get some Yoda for sure. Young Yoda with a little less, wrinkles on the eyes, and less crow's feet. But I'm looking forward to it to see like kind of a brand new era. My favorite thing about the Phantom Menace, which I really liked, even for all of its faults back in the day when everybody was hating on it, was like, you got to give George credit. He could have gone easy and been like, oh, these are early versions of X-Wings and early versions of TIE Fighters. Like, he made sure the aesthetic of that universe felt like, what is it, 60 years or 30 years, I forget, that many years ago, right? Just like in Back to the Future, 1985 is not going to look like 1955. And that would be some of the concerns or criticisms of The Force Awakens, that like, it didn't feel like the galaxy really expanded much on their tech. So I'm looking forward to seeing what 100 years prior. I hope they are challenging themselves and they make sure it does look like a completely different thing. I mean, as much as I love KOTOR, like, let's be honest, like 3,000 years, Tatooine would look much different than it does, but KOTOR makes it look exactly as they want, the familiarity. But I'm hoping they make take some risks here with the Acolyte.
Yeah. Laura, what about you?
I'm just really excited about the idea of this show being, number one, focused on villains, because Star Wars, if it does one thing really well for me, it's a really good villain. And the fact that it's going to be focused specifically, it sounds like, on female villains, which I'm very excited about. So there's a couple different components of the show that are really appealing to me. The fact that it's going to be taking place in the High Republic is just a given. Like, I am 100% on board. They could have said nothing else and I would have been in. But the fact that they're saying that it's taking place over a century before the Phantom Menace is really interesting to me, because I feel like all week I was seeing people talking on Twitter about how the show takes place 100 years before the Phantom Menace. And for some reason, people interpret it as exactly 100 years. And I'm kind of glad that it's not that. It sounds like we might be going back a little bit further, hopefully, because my question was, okay, so this character Vernestra Rowe, that anybody who reads the High Republic Phase 1 novels is familiar with, is this Mary Allen Jedi in the High Republic. And in this phase, she's an elder Jedi master, according to this article. And so people are like, how old do Mary Allens live to? And like, we don't know. I mean, and that's fine, but that we don't know, that they just kind of leave it open to interpretation. But it actually makes it just slightly more realistic for me, because they are sort of human-like, humanoid, if you will, in the Star Wars universe, that they're a little bit closer to maybe not living to be who knows how many hundreds of years old, like Yoda and Yaddle. But that's another thing. You mentioned Yoda. I hope Yaddle makes an appearance, because she's in this book right here, Cataclysm, and she's badass.
Well, how else would Grogu get conceived? Come on, you got to have Yaddle.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
Let's
not get into Grogu's parents.
Just like, and this is the last episode that Kevin is the co-host.
We'll find out maybe.
It's really interesting, because I mean, she followed this up with an interview Leslie Headland did, talking about the Acolyte, and she's essentially inferred that this will be a commentary on the current American society, culture, and politics. So I find this to be fascinating from looking at it from the outside, because clearly a lot of the Star Wars stuff has gotten attacked for, the woke or whatever, diversity, all this kind of stuff. And as you said, they're focusing on the female villains here. So it's going to be really interesting what she's going to bring here. And she says, when I was a young queer girl, I was just hanging out with Ursula the Sea Witch from Little Mermaid. By the way, shout out to the live action one. You all should go see it. As a queer girl growing up, if you don't identify with the heroes and the villains show up and they're all queer coded, you're like, yes, that's me. You're going to see some camp inevitably, but I would say that tonally, our references are darker, and the series would be told from the perspective of the villains. So that's going to be really interesting too, right? I mean, again, how do you expand the band, expand the franchise, is offering new points of views on situations. This is the tail end of the High Republic, right? When the Sith come in. So what happens here that she's going to be commenting on as a commentary over on not only in our society, but also of the Star Wars universe as a pattern here that it's going to develop and be repeated multiple times, Laura.
Yeah, I think, there's a couple of sort of big picture ideas that they've talked about focusing on this show. And one of them is about, the show will be about power and who's allowed to wield it. I mean, that sounds a lot like a modern day concept.
Yeah.
And yeah, a lot of the Star Wars stories have been touching on this in on the Disney Plus series, and I actually really love that. I mean, the fact that, you know, this past season of The Mandalorian was, the whole theme was Mandalorians are stronger together. It's our
Right.
division that is going to destroy us. I mean, hello, that's not even just American politics, that's like the whole world's
That's true.
politics. So
True.
it's I kind of like this direction that they've been going in. I understand a lot of people have an issue with it, and I'm suck it up, too bad. Like, this is the way that it is, and I love that they're bringing in all these diverse storytellers to tell these amazing Star Wars stories. And this one is what I'm particularly looking forward to, especially since it's sort of talking, they seem to be emphasizing the kind of darkness that's going to come across with this. We got a lot of sort of that dark, gritty politicalness in Andor too, so I'll be kind of curious to see how this lines up with that.
Kevin, do you see any dangers with going this route, like doing it from the villain's perspective or anything?
No, I mean, ask Breaking Bad, right?
Good point.
Right,
Sopranos.
like, you know, one of my favorite. Have you guys read Plagueis?
No,
I have not read that one. No,
I've heard a lot about it though. My co-host on Force Host, Alice,
it's
loves
not
it.
technically canon anymore. It can still be canon in your head.
Yeah.
I really recommend it. It is so good, and it is really about the villains, and like you see a lot of that Sith lore and about Plagueis and even his master, and then you see like the first time. I mean, I don't want to drop spoilers, but like the first time that Palpatine like really displays his power as a young man, it is terrifying and really scary. So I'm looking forward to it, and I hope that it, you know, it sounds like a lot of that. One of the quotes that talks about how it's like how they get in the upper echelon of the Republic. So that, for me, it sounds very familiar with the Plagueis novel. And so I, even if there are dangers for it, like, you know, I mean, who knows now with like the viewing, like, right? Like, I guess they like Obi-Wan had great numbers and Andor didn't have great numbers, but Andor was more highly regarded. So you just never know. But for me, I'm happy that they're going to go this route. I love seeing things from a different point of view, and so this will be good. And I implore you, when things are slow, maybe we can get you guys to read or listen. The audio novel is fantastic too. Great acting in the audio novel, and it's just really good. It's like it's now required listening or reading before I ever do like a revisit of all the movies. So and it takes place, half of it takes place during the Phantom Menace. It pulls like the second half of it. Like there is a scene where it's from the Phantom Menace that I can never unsee now, because there's a scene in the Plagueis novel that happens exactly like from a different perspective, and you're like, holy crap. That's all I'll say.
Okay.
Neat.
Yeah.
Is it the Tale of Darth Plagueis the Wise? Is that what you're saying? Is that the one?
It's
I see it now.
It's basically
it's just called Plagueis.
It's basically how Palpatine like rises to power, and then eventually, like he tells in the story of like kills Plagueis. But like,
is it canon or is it
spoiler?
No,
spoiler
this is
for
Legends.
anyone.
Oh, so this is Legends. All right.
Yeah.
So
Spoiler for anyone if you haven't read this book though. But I'll just say this: Plagueis is alive during the first half of Phantom Menace. That's how it's crazy.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
And it makes sense that you don't see him in the movie, but
it's $8.99 on paperback. So I mean, I'm sure I can find it on Amazon and get it. So yeah, done and done.
We're coming up on a break here with the Star Wars novels, with Phase 2 of the High Republic coming to an end, and then the next book I don't think comes out until July. So I will have a little bit of a break. Might have to take a look at the audiobook for Plagueis.
I've heard Lost Stars for me.
So many good things about that book. So you're not the first person to recommend it.
I want to ask one question for you. Something that's been occurring in my mind as we've been exploring, especially coming out of The Mandalorian, is, are we in danger of showing humanizing too much the other side, the villains? Is that going to possibly stain the Jedi, blemish the Jedi? And at some point you're like, well, shit, both sides are kind of correlative, and you start to, the good and the bad start to kind of get fuzzy the lines a little bit, because we see in Mandalorian season 3 that the New Republic won, but they were so incompetent that the First Order came back. So it's like, well, what was the point of winning? You know, it's almost like a microcosm of I threw Palpatine down the well. Well, guess what? He came back. So what was the point of throwing him down the well? So I just get worried if we see too much of the villain stuff and start to understand the villain's points of views, that we end up undercutting the quote unquote good side of Star Wars in the Jedi. Do you guys think that's going too far, or do you think they'll always be able to pull it back because there are such good Jedi?
I don't know if I'm too worried about it going too
Okay.
far. I mean, you think about like we've got so many Star Wars villains who, not so many. We have a select amount of Star Wars villains who eventually end up getting redeemed. But
Yes.
we've got a decent amount of villains who don't and who shouldn't. I mean, we like went through this whole thing with Moff Gideon over the course of 3 seasons of The
Good point.
Mandalorian, and I'm not sitting over here like he was right, like he should have been like he
That's
was just
true.
a straight up villain, and he
Yeah.
was a really really good one.
Yeah.
So I am. That's again just one of the many things I love about Star Wars, that they do villains so well, and sometimes they do make them sympathetic, and when they do it well. But they
Yeah.
don't always have to go that route. So I'm not particularly too worried, but I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this, Kevin.
Well, it's funny you say that. I think when we were first starting the Scoundrels Inc. podcast, like before Andor and stuff, my first one I wanted to talk about was are there too many villains like redeemed? And I think I found a list, because Frank didn't agree with me. He's like, no, it's like, and I'm like, I think I found a list where the number, and of course it's including legends and stuff.
Right.
It's like 65. Like 65 villains. So I agree with you, Laura, that it's refreshing that this new take that these guys aren't being redeemed. I wonder with the Acolyte, we're going to see it through their eyes. We're going to start rooting for these characters, right? Like, and then that just becomes fun. Like, oh man, I'm kind of rooting for her to infiltrate the Jedi and slaughter everyone. Like I mean, I don't. Were we rooting for Anakin to kill all those kids? Like,
no,
I don't know. He was the protagonist. I mean, are we supposed to? I don't know at that point, but. Yeah, I totally agree with Laura. Like, I think that it's, I don't think it will dilute it. And I think that, especially as of late, they're getting a little more, they're kind of sticking to their guns, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I don't mind obviously the Ahsoka moment where she turns her back on the Jedi Council. That's earned, that you understand why that happens. But the council still serves a purpose. They may not have been right in every decision, but they still served a purpose. So I don't want to erode the purposes of these things while we also had new dimensions to Star Wars, which I think I'm very excited to see. I just get worried sometimes, but I'm a warrior. What else, Laura? What do we got here?
Well, I would just be curious to maybe hear some of your guys' highlights from the rest of this spread. I don't know if we want to go in any particular order, but I thought Katie Sackhoff's interview in particular was like really funny and charming.
Yeah.
I just wish it would have come out before the season 3 finale of The Mandalorian, so some of the things that she'd said would have made more sense. Because coming out after we'd already seen it, I was just like, I don't know what we're talking about here. But that's beside the point. I think reading through some of these pages, I really enjoyed getting some of the insight about Ahsoka in that series. I mean, getting to hear a little bit from Natasha Liu Bordizzo and from Mary Elizabeth Winstead, I thought was really interesting, and their take on sort of how this is a continuation of Star Wars Rebels, but it's also sort of its new thing, but it's still kind of all about that sort of found family theme that we know and love so much in Star Wars. So there was some great insight in it. It just felt like a lot of it for me in particular was review, because a lot of this happened in Celebration.
Yeah, I mean, I liked Kathleen talking about I think she said this, that the opening crawl was coming back. I thought that was a nice to hear about that as well. And I enjoyed Filoni's conversation about Ahsoka and making it very clear that, as you just mentioned, that Thrawn is the villain, is the overall villain. And even that Thrawn will be making it out of Ahsoka, because he's essentially going to be what his movie, which we're going to get to later on the show, is. He's going to be the big bad in that movie. It seems like that's what they're leading to. So I like that there were some concrete polls put in the ground for us to understand or what's going to happen, or to look forward to things coming back that have been kind of moved away. I agree with you. A lot of stuff we'd already seen announced at Star Wars Celebration, if people were there in those panels, and some of the news that came out as well afterwards. But yeah, the Sackhoff interview was great. I thought the Andor stuff was fantastic. I really enjoyed the idea of what they're looking towards in season 2. They broke down how every 3 episodes is going to be 1 year in this time, and then the last 3 are going to be the last 3 or 4 days, or 4 or 5 days leading up to right before we start Rogue One. Also hearing that from Felicity Jones herself, that she's not coming back in any way in season 2 of Andor. I think it was a bit depressing for me, because I like Felicity in the role. I know she's taken some slack, but I liked her in the role. So the fact she's not coming back is kind of a sad thing for me. At least I know she doesn't meet him till Rogue One, but we could still have things with her like Saw, who was in season 1. You could have something there with them. So just explore that. But yeah, but overall, I liked what we got. I liked the fact that we had Andy Serkis speaking more about how Kino is going to be coming back. You didn't see a body, so there's excitement there. Denise Goff talking about what she is looking forward to doing in Andor season 2. So that's going to be fun. And what Cyril's role is going to be as well. So a lot of the Andor stuff really got me excited for sure. But overall, it was very positive 20 pages, getting you excited about all these different types of projects coming. Oh, and Ahsoka being dark as hell, which Rosario was saying. What about you, Kevin? Anything stand out for you on your side?
Shout out to Ray Stevenson's interview too.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I love Ray Stevenson. I think you said I loved Rome.
Dude.
Yeah. And so anything with Ray Stevenson, I love it. Even Punisher Warzone that I had to watch 50 times for the Schmodown. But he talks about how, like, anytime you see an actor talk about how they're making the sounds vroom vroom when they have the lightsaber, like that just warms my geek heart. And he literally was making the noise, and they're like, everyone does that, don't worry about it. Like, and he's just been so giddy with excitement of being part of Star Wars. And then him talking so highly about Mikkelsen too, Lars Mikkelsen, sorry, as Thrawn. Like, this gets me excited. Like, it's a good piece. Yeah, you're right, it should have been released right around because this would have all been really cool during the celebration week, but yeah.
And those, what are they playing? Like the red, what was it? The Sith? God, I can't remember right now. What is Ray Stevenson? What is his brand that he's playing? Is he playing a Jedi? Is he playing a Sith? A different kind of Sith?
Oh, so that's the whole debate right now is with the orange lightsaber, because I think there's an interview somewhere where Dave Filoni came out and he's like, no, it's not red. You're not seeing like an off-color red. It's different than red. It means different things. And we're all like, what does that mean? And he's like, can't tell you. So that's the big question mark right now.
More toy sales is what it means.
Yeah. It'll be damn right, but it'll be really interesting to see how these two characters, because it's not just Ray Stevenson, it's this female character. I'm sorry, I don't remember the actress's name. Is also wielding a orange lightsaber, I think, in the preview. So I'm excited to see it. Have I told you guys about my Andor theory with Rogue One and the last 3 episodes?
No.
Okay, so
hear it.
Building on what you said, my theory is that the last 3 episodes of Andor season 2 that are supposed to be leading up to Rogue One, I think we're going to overlap with Rogue One a little bit. I think we're going to see some like, not necessarily like see things that we saw in Rogue One, but like the time will overlap a little bit, and we'll see some other stuff from different characters, like points of view and things.
Well, that's kind of like what Clone Wars did, with their finale and tying into episode 3. So I'll have to have Frank edit a Rogue One supercut like he did for episode 3.
Nice.
Get on that, Frank.
Didn't we see the Ghost Ship and Chopper in Rogue One? So
we did.
That could be crossing over, right, from Ahsoka into Andor season 2, possibly, right? Isn't that possible?
Well, different.
Hera, maybe Hera.
I did wonder about that. I'm like, would we maybe see Hera? I guess I don't know where Ahsoka is in this time period. I think she's like in the world between worlds still?
I guess I don't know. I meant
Hera's there. They call her name out in Rogue One, right? So
Who
knows?
I don't know. We'll see. I'm excited for it though, and I hope Rogue One, my favorite Star Wars movie. I do hope that there's a little bit of, which is why you'd think that I would have enjoyed Andor more. I'm hoping. I have high hopes for season 2. Honestly, I really
Star Wars movie, really.
Rogue One is my favorite one, yes.
Of all of them, and you didn't like Andor. That is crazy.
I know. I hate it. It's not. I don't want to be this person. I've said this before. I have high hopes for season 2. There are parts of season 1 I really enjoyed, but I'm thinking leading up to Rogue One and maybe overlapping a little bit, I'll be all in by that point.
Yeah.
Maybe you needed that Gareth Edwards touch. Because he was
that preview for his new movie that came out today. Holy shit!
The creator,
that looks like the next big franchise.
Yeah, 100%. All right, well, let's take a quick break here, and then we'll jump into some more topics right after this. All right, Laura, where shall we go into the galaxy next?
Heir to the Empire. Let's dive into this, because Kevin and I are on different wavelengths 100% with this. Okay. And let's maybe start in the middle. Like, John, where do you land on this spectrum of whether or not, number one, you believe that it's happening, or number two, if you actually want this to be the case?
Okay. So remember Marvel. It is under the Disney banner as well, right? Civil War was not the Civil War I got in the comics, but there were elements of it.
Okay.
The Infinity Gauntlet run that they based the Thanos stuff on, there were elements of it in the Infinity War Endgame saga, right? So I think calling it Heir to the Empire works because Kathleen made it clear from the beginning that she and they are going to decide what is canon and what isn't canon, which of course was big controversy at the time. But she has shown a propensity to allow the creators to borrow from Legends and bring them in and make them canon when it's convenient. I don't think you can bring Thrawn in and not do Heir to the Empire. So it just makes all the sense in the world that he would do it. I just want to prepare everybody in the Star Wars universe who love these 3 novels and love this whole story to understand that this is not going to be fully that story. And if you're going to compare this movie to that, you're going to be left wanting. So I think overall it is going to be called Heir to the Empire because most of the mainstream Star Wars fans don't know, or mainstream movie-going public don't know about Heir to the Empire that much. Thrawn is still something new they're discovering, probably a lot of them. So how are we going to get it? We got to figure out how to work those story beats in with the overall story that we're trying to tell. And I think Heir to the Empire was written before we had Clone Wars and all these other things that he's going to be weaving in as well, Ahsoka and what have you. So there's got to be ways to borrow elements of it and still call it Heir to the Empire, but it's Heir to the Empire for this particular approach and feature film. Yeah. So yeah, I think it's possible.
Okay. All right. Before we get Kevin's point of view, we're going to end on the high note. So I'm going to go next.
Oh, okay.
I do not want this to be the case. I've got a couple of reasons. Number one, yes. I think there are a lot more people that read those books than we probably think. The Heir to the Empire, the original Legends Thrawn trilogy.
Okay.
I think those people are going to come to the theater expecting something and getting a completely different movie and are going to be confused and upset. They're gonna be like, why the fuck is Bo-Katan in this movie? Like that, she wasn't around in Heir to the Empire. And I'm like, so I'm worried that people are going to be upset about that and confused. Okay. Number two, I just don't, like, why are we taking the exact title? Like, do we have to take the exact, I'm like, I think this is a working title. I don't think that this is actually the final title of the movie. I wonder if this is like our Blue Harvest or our Jar Jar's Big Adventure. Like this is, I feel like it's just like a sort of placeholder working title, like they did Solo Cup for the solo movie or Red Cup for the solo movie. Like I think it's a situation like that. And somebody got word of it and ran with it in what I'm hoping is the incorrect way. So I also have this thing with Legends where I've never read a Legends book and I've been so deep into canon stuff in Star Wars for so long. And that, I mean, trivia stuff is partially why I didn't want to like get confused, get all my timelines confused. So I purposely avoided it. But there are sometimes like things with Legends where I just kind of like, I feel a little like left out, which is stupid, but I'm like, I don't want to be left out when this movie comes out. And I don't think I will be, because if it sounds like this is going to be our Avengers, like our Avengers sort of coming together version of Star Wars, our sort of end game, if you will, I don't think it's going to be that. I also am still in the camp that I know Filoni said it, but I don't think Thrawn is going to be our ultimate big bad. I think it's going to end up being something else, because I just don't see it going that way with Thrawn. We talked about villains already a little bit today, and I'm like, he's one of those ones where like you are cheering for him in those books and every trilogy. And I can't speak for the Legends one because I don't know, but the canon ones, I'm like, you are cheering for him throughout pretty much every part of that novel, even if you don't want to be. You're like, oh shit, here we are. So that's where I stand on it. I don't want Heir to the Empire to be the final title. I also just kind of think it's dumb that they would be copying it. So that's my point of view. Where do you land on this, Kevin? Let's lay it on us.
I agree with you, Laura. No, I'm just kidding.
No,
Well, before I start, I do preface by saying, and this is because I know how much you love Star Wars, I implore you, do not let Legends scare you away from Plagueis and from Lost Stars. Those are two of some of the best storytelling.
Lost Stars is canon.
Lost Stars is canon.
Oh, okay. Yeah. But Plagueis.
This is one of the first ones.
I get Heir to the Empire and all these other ones, like with the Wuzon Kong or whatever. Like it's a heavy load. It's just kind of how intimidating High Republic kind of is to a newbie, right?
Yeah.
But there are some very good legend stories, and I know it's tough because it's like, well, now that's not canon anymore. It doesn't really count, but. I just don't want you to kind of lose out on some of the storytelling, especially Plagueis. I'm just a big Plagueis fan. But going back to your thought, I think honestly it's going to be in name only, and I'm fine with it. Listen, 1991. Okay, it had been 8-9 years since a Star Wars movie. We had no clue there was ever going to be one in 1999. And I remember as a kid reading Heir to the Empire on a flight to Hawaii, and just and it made the flight feel like an hour and a half. And I have a certain love for it, and I think a lot of people do. And I don't think people are going in expecting a DH Han and Leia and Luke and that story. In fact, I don't want them to do that. Like Rocha said, man, You got Infinity War. Do you know that Infinity War, the story is that Thanos is in love with Mistress Death,
Right,
and is collecting the stones because he wants her favor.
Right.
So I don't think anybody went to the theater and was mad that, oh my God, he's doing it to kill half the population, not because he's in love with Mistress Death. No one's missing it, right? So with Heir of the Empire,
and it's Nebula that takes him out in that story.
Yeah, and I think it's forgivable that people will be like, for me, if they just call it that in name only because Thrawn's in it, I like that. That actually touches me in a good way. Like, oh, like that's a good homage to, like, they're not forgetting it. I don't think they're going to try to go beat for beat. Like he said, Civil War, Secret Invasion, upcoming World's Finest, Batman vs Superman's based on a comic book. All of these stories they're allowed to take from that title. But I mean, I don't even think you're going to get the Horus Sealbath, and maybe you'll get the animals that prevent the Force. But like, I honestly think that we might be overthinking it a little. And I think if he calls it Heir of the Empire and it's just in name only, it's totally fine. I don't think it's going to follow any of the main plot points from Heir of the Empire. And I'm asking you, Laura, if it doesn't, because we're not getting Mara Jade or any of that. If it doesn't do any of those things, if it's just in name only, would that be okay for you?
Oh yeah, 100%, 100%. I'm like, and that's the other thing that keeps coming up. And people are just like, "Is Mara Jade going to be in it? Are we going to bring Mara Jade?" I'm like, that word is muted in my Twitter, like in my settings, and like somebody used it in one of my replies, and it was like blocked out. It's like somebody used one of your muted words. I was like, "Ooh, which one?" And then I was like, "Oh yeah, I shouldn't have clicked on this. That's why I muted it."
Yeah, I mean, I like Mara Jade, but I don't think she has any place in there. It's too late for that now. Like, let's just focus on the story. It's an Avengers level event, and calling it Heir to the Empire. You heard I think that the crowd, like when she says it in the trailer for Ahsoka, the crowd at Celebration, where you were there, like
I was there.
Yeah, like everybody popped, right? So huge pop. So
yeah. I think at the end of the day, if it is called that, it's not going to be that, and because they've set nothing up to be able to have that. Even if you do Ahsoka, that whole series isn't going to set up what you need to set up to lead to Heir to the Empire. No way is there enough time or episode.
Well, you've got Ahsoka, you've got Mandalorian season 4, and you've got Skeleton Crew. So I'm like, what if you had all three of those? Then could you set everything up or no? I don't even know. See, I don't know.
I don't know that everybody would watch all three of those. That's the other part of this thing, right? I mean, it's a lot of people.
And Heir to the Empire is so dependent on, like, Luke's a huge part of it, and Han, like, and Leia, and like they're not. That's not going to be the trio. It's going to be you know, Din and Bo-Katan and hopefully Boba Fett and
I mean,
you know, Cassian Andor and you know every Disney
Ahsoka
Plus character
and
and Tivik. Just kidding, but yeah. So yeah, I think if it's in name only, it's going to be fine. I really like that Marvel comparison, because like I don't think I mean, some of these original comic book stories were so bonkers. And I'm glad that they didn't, you know, word for word get translated. And I think Heir to the Empire is just like, look, especially, by the way, if Thrawn is the main threat. And also another thing I just thought about, it might be your last opportunity to have the Empire, because the Empire, this might be where the Empire is finally dust, and then it's going to transition into the First Order, right? So it's kind of like a last ride for the Empire. One last ride. Family, nothing more important than Empire and family.
Part one. Wait, what?
Part
I thought
one,
it was
right?
the last ride. I got a question though. I mean, this idea of where we're going to go with this, Laura. You keep mentioning that you don't think Thrawn's going to be the big baddie. Wouldn't that mean that we get Palpatine back? Isn't Palpatine his boss in a way? So, do you think there'd be another big baddie besides Thrawn?
Yeah, I think it's going to be something new, and I think so I think we've heard some sort of like rumblings of these things, and we've seen some of these things sort of hinted at, I think, in some of the Thrawn books, the canon Thrawn novels. And I wonder if what we're going to ultimately lead to is we're going to finally get to Thrawn, and we're going to finally learn that like everything he's been doing is not really ultimately to serve the Empire. It's to serve his people. He served the Empire so that he could help his people, because that was the military like power of the galaxy at that time. Like that was just the logical step for him. And we all know that's all Thrawn does. He's just logic. So it was, I think that we're going to, once the Empire starts to fall, once he sees that it's going away, I think we're going to see a switch happen. And I don't think that ultimately he's going to be our big bad by the time we get to this movie. But that's just my theory.
Yeah.
Could be totally wrong. And I'm totally fine. I'm totally wrong. I'm not married to this theory.
It's such a weird correlation, but there was a movie called The Negotiator with Kevin Spacey and Samuel L. Jackson.
Yeah.
And the trailer had a line that wasn't in the movie, but like it was basically a hostage taker, and he was doing the thing for the right reasons because there was corporate, or I mean, there was corruption in the police force or whatever. Right. And Kevin Spacey was like the negotiator, right? Hence the title. But like the whole movie, they're like, you know, versus each other until the end where he realizes the corruption. And then there was a line from the trailer where they both are next to each other, and then the good guy cop says, now they're gonna have to deal with the both of us. So maybe Thrawn will finally have his back to the wall and realize, no, this is bad. Like, this isn't good for my people. And then him, and you know, they'll have the Avengers sweeping shot, and they'll have Din, Bo-Katan, and Thrawn with his pistol or with his animal. So it'll be this epic, like, now they'll have to, it will be like the Negotiator from that movie. That weird.
So what you're saying is it'll be now 66 villains that have been redeemed in Star. Is that what you're telling me, Kevin?
Yeah, we're at 66. 66.
Oh boy.
But listen, like Dave Filoni has to promote it as Thrawn. I mean, he can't just come out and just be like, yeah, Thrawn's going to be in it, but he's not going to be the big bad. Like, he can't say that. You obviously, like, you have to, you want to sell it a certain way, and I get it. So I'm not saying he's lying, but I think he's lying.
I think, and it's not out of the realm possibility in Star Wars. People lie all the time recently about Star Wars, for sure. But you're absolutely right, because Christopher McQuarrie, in a recent interview about Mission Impossible 7, The Dead Reckoning, Part 1 thing, said, well, Palm Clementieff starts off on Esai Morales' side. And I was like, stop talking. I don't want to know the starting off, because that implies she ends up someplace else. What is wrong with you? So, yeah, Filoni knows. I can't say anything. I'm just going to put it out there, and then we'll see where the story goes. So, all right, well, let's move on. What do we got next?
Yeah, let's talk about The Mandalorian season 4, because right now I got a lot of questions, because it sounds like with the WGA strike, there's a lot of our favorite shows, sadly, are going to be delayed in terms of starting production, in terms of being written. It sounds like, according to Variety, that The Mandalorian season 4 is already written. And we've heard Jon Favreau talking about how he had written season 4. I guess I had sort of interpreted that as like they kind of knew what the story was going to be, but maybe all the scripts weren't completely finalized. But who knows exactly what that means? Yeah. But I've seen a couple of different articles this week come across my desk saying, no, The Mandalorian is going to be delayed. It's just inevitable. But also, I don't think it was supposed to start. I think Variety saying wasn't supposed to start production until like the fall, like late fall this year, even. So I don't know. I'm up in the air as to what any of these mean. I'm not sure who to believe and who not, but it's just kind of interesting to see how some of this is going to potentially bleed into Star Wars. At the very least, I'm glad that like we've got some shows that are done at least, and now they're in post-production. So at least we'll hopefully get those at some point soon. But where do you guys land on this? I mean, like who do we believe in this situation?
Well, if you haven't finished shooting and reshoots, then you're in trouble. That's the way I look at it. You know, the other show I co-host on the channel here with the Hot Mic with Jeff, you know, Jeff's in touch with the industry, certainly knows everything is going on, and talking about these writers striking and everything and negotiations. We saw the proposals that the studio, the AMPTP came with, and it was really insulting, those proposals. And so that looks like it's going to be a long slog. It's going to depend on what happens with the DGA, the WGA, and I don't want to get, DGA and SAG. I don't want to get lost in the slog of all that, but it's going to be some stuff that gets negotiated. I think if it doesn't wrap up in the next 2 months, we're looking at delays on a lot of these projects and a lot of these situations, because yes, you can finish all the scripts, but that means you can't change one word while you're shooting. You can't even suggest them saying a line in a different way, because a lot of these directors, and Favreau gets these guest directors and Filoni gets guest directors and what have you, they're also WGA members, because a lot of them have written scripts as well. So if they take that very seriously, crossing the line and what they can and can't say in those situations on a set. And if you're doing reshoots, naturally you're going to change the script. So those are those things that I think where it gets to be a trouble for these shows. But the Acolyte is done, reshoots done. That's all done. That is coming. So that's at least in the can. And of course they're doing editing and all that stuff, post-production. But the actual shooting, if they haven't finished shooting and finished doing the reshoots, I think if we don't solve anything in the next couple of months, all those shows, Star Wars shows, are going to be delayed. Marvel shows, all that stuff for sure. What do you think, Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, as someone that was in the Editors Guild and we were really close to striking, which, you know, would have been very hard because it was just me coming back from my cancer fight and like getting back into work, like, and it would have been really hard. But I was fully backing MPEG and everybody involved with that. So, if it means that some of our Star Wars shows have to be delayed, but to get these guys and girls and very talented people paid for their efforts, because a lot of them really just go paycheck to paycheck. I'm in support of it, and that'll give Laura time to read Plagueis. So, and Rocha.
Very true. Very true. Yeah, it sounds like Skeleton Crew and Ahsoka were done and in the can. I think Andor is the one that's in the middle of I don't know if they're in the middle, but they were at some point in their schedule of still filming. So
Tony was going to go forward with Andor. He was like out there talking like, we're going to keep going.
Yeah.
And then he eventually had a conversation there with Chris Kaiser at the WGA. Different Kaiser, Kevin.
Not John Kaiser? Not John Kaiser?
No. And they had a conversation about it. And I think Chris let him know, like, dude, you cannot be on set shooting stuff and changing dialogue at all in any way, shape, or form, because then you're violating the rules and you're violating the spirit of the strike. And so I think Tony realized that. And so, okay, he's not going to be involved. Even though the scripts are done, he's going to hold off on it for now. So to me, it's like, look, you've got things that are scheduled, and you all know this, like, if you wake up an hour late, everything gets pushed. So it's not just Star Wars stuff. Disney has multiple projects going on at the same time. So the idea of moving one to adjust another, to make way for another, and then are the same people going to be available? Are they going to jump on other projects? What's the material? Is the settings going to be available? Have the seasons changed? There's a lot to factor in to what goes on when you delay something a couple of months. So it could delay when these films come out, and we're back in the COVID situation where things keep getting pushed and pushed and pushed and what have you. So I think it's going to be really interesting how these all come out. And another one is Bad Batch, right? I mean, they're animation writers. They're not under the WGA, but some of these animation writers are WGA people. So are they going to feel a kinship to stay on strike and not come and write episodes of Bad Batch, because that helps the studio make money, which allows them to stay afloat without having to compromise on the deal. So there's a lot of moving parts in all of this that still need to get figured out down the road. So I won't be surprised if we hear some of these being pushed in terms of their release dates. Even though we just got an Ahsoka release date, right? I think it's August or July.
Well, so I was going to bring that up actually, because it came out, I think, I don't know if it was yesterday or earlier today, that it was supposed to come out on Thursday, August 31st, which is unusual. And then, and that was according to a post on the Disney Movie Insiders website, which then got taken down. So it sounds like that's August 31st, not actually our date, which kind of makes sense, because it would have been unusual, I think, for us to get a Star Wars show on a Thursday. I'm sure they're going to stick with their Wednesday release dates for the time being, but I don't know. Interesting that it wasn't the first time that Star Wars has put a release date out there somewhere and then had to change it or take it down. I mean, I think it happened with the Bad Batch 2 or 3 times. So who knows?
That's a good point, actually. Yeah, it has. Yeah. Anything more we should say on this, Kevin or Laura?
On the strike, I don't think so. But I'm, I know the last one was 3 months? Was it like November to February? So hopefully they can come to a faster conclusion than that one. But I wouldn't be surprised if it lasts longer.
I keep hearing end of the year.
Wow.
I heard Memorial Day of next year. Some people are speculating, and I was speaking with a critic the other day who is has a lot of contacts with the studio, and she was like, it could even be December of next year. And I'm like, what? Because they've planned that far ahead with their slates of movies or whatever. And this is like the mafia, man. We've seen in Godfather, right? Every 10 years, this needs to happen to wipe out the bad blood. And the way they're looking at it is this is an excuse for the studios to kill certain projects that they realized they didn't want to fund anyway. So it's an excuse. So there's so much involved here, that goes on. Don't go in wide-eyed to these negotiations, because a lot of people have ulterior motives. And we just had today, they released the salaries of these people at the high echelon of all these studios, and it's insulting to the writers how much.
Oh, I imagine it'll make you throw up. Anybody. Yeah. I don't, oh God, I won't say I don't want to know, but I'm going to go look.
Yeah, fair enough. All right. Well, so what else we got here, Laura? We'll wrap up the show in the next 5 minutes. What do we got?
Yeah, I don't know. I wanted to bring up the fact that we finally got the news that the Mandalorian, the making of season 3, the Disney Gallery episode, is going to be coming on June 28th. I'm very excited about that, but beyond that, there's not a whole lot else here on our list. Do you guys have anything else you wanted to bring up?
Yeah, Kevin, did you get a chance to play Star Wars Jedi Survivor? I bought it last weekend. I haven't had an opportunity to open it and play it. Have you played it? Have you been enjoying it?
Well, I don't have the time to play it. I wish. And based on your schedule, you're the hardest working man I know. I don't know how you're going to find the time to play it either, my friend. But I remember I sent you that 3-hour video. Like, so on launch day, like I watched that 3-hour thing the night of. So like the next day, like I was telling my friends that have played it and have done these streams 10 hours at a time and like trying over and over to beat the bosses and stuff. It feels bad that like I can talk about it on a story level sense because it's like that stolen valor of like, stolen valor is like, oh, I served, but I didn't serve. Oh yeah, that was really tough when Cal Kestis had to fight that one dude from the High Republic. But once you get your hands on it, I can't wait to get your opinion on it. And we can talk about the story because I think there's some interesting things that add to the lore of Star Wars that I think would be worthy of a discussion here.
Well, I read an article where they were talking about, the path that we saw in Kenobi in the series, where the Jedi, that is in the game.
It is.
There's allusions to it in the game. So that makes me real excited. But some people are speculating that might be why we don't get a second season of Obi-Wan Kenobi, is because they might be wanting to focus on all these Jedi like Quinlan Vos and others who were able to escape after Order 66 and follow their story. So it could be possible. Who knows? You never know. You never say never in Star Wars. We've seen so many people come back after we thought they weren't going to, including recently Ahmad Best, coming back to be such an important part, right? So yeah. Which Filoni and Favreau talked about recently and said they've got, ideas. So hopefully it isn't the last we've seen him as Kelleran Beck. What else? Anybody else got anything else you guys want to talk about? This toy collection selling for $850,000? Like,
how did you afford that? How did you afford that, John?
Yeah, I know. It was real tough. It was real tough. I had to leverage a few houses, a few castles.
He's secretly a studio exec. That's how he afforded it.
No, I'm secretly mad at my mother for making me throw these all out. That's what I'm secretly mad
at. Oh, I'll have a story. So I stood in line for the Return of the Jedi Special Edition 1997. And if you remember, it was released on March 14th, I think, but the original air date or release date was March 7th, and they delayed it by a week, like right near the release.
Right.
And so I had this toy that they gave out to everybody in line, and it was like this Luke Skywalker. It had the wrong date on it, March 14th. And in my head in college, I'm like, oh, this is going to be worth, by the way, fast forward, it's not even worth that much due to eBay and everything. It's not that. But like, I thought this is going to be something in 20 years that I could like, buy a car or buy my first house with. Right. So I come home from college and it's still at my mom's house. My mom's like, hey, I got a surprise for you. Come in your room. And, those toys have like a hook, right? But my mom decides to put a nail right through the cardboard on the wall, destroying the perfectness of that toy. So here's the hook, and the nails are right through the hook. Luke Skywalker, special edition, March 7th, wrong release date. And I ended up being, so I was not too happy about that. But that's my story about parents destroying our childhood.
There you go. It always happens. And shout out to the makers of Jedi Survivor. In 2 days, they became the highest selling video game of the month. In 2 days of the month.
Wow.
That's incredible, man. So
it's worth it, man. Everybody's loving it. You're gonna love it.
It was available though at my Best Buy where I'm here in San Diego. They had 5 copies on the day of the release. I was shocked.
I love living in San Diego for this. Like, movies aren't super, like I do like a packed movie, and you see all the movies early, so it doesn't matter for you, John. But movie pack, like I was able to get like tickets for Guardians, like really easy. Whereas in LA, it's like it's the hot thing everybody's gonna do. And I think San Diego is a little easier. Like I don't think it has its fingers so much on the pulse in entertainment. So it's kind of like this whole playground that we got. Like, I can do everything. So
they're like, we'll get around to it. We'll get around. We gotta get to it. That's the way San Diego.
You're going to spearhead it, bro. You're going to lead it into the next generation.
No, I love that it's we'll get around to it. I love that attitude down here.
Yeah,
a lot more relaxing. It's true. All right, well there you go. That's our episode of the Jedi Way for this week. Thank you all so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And I gotta say, it's so much fun to have Kevin being a part of the show. The three of us have just kind of fallen into a nice chemistry and nice rhythm, and it's been great to see. But of course, always OG, that's Laura Kelly. Laura, thank you so much. Another fun ass show. Please let people know where they can find you, anything got going on Star Wars wise and otherwise.
Sure, I tweet a lot about Star Wars. You can come find me on Twitter at @shutup_Laura. I'm at the same handle on Instagram, and then I talk about Star Wars more on my podcast Force Toast, a Star Wars happy hour. You can find that on Twitter at Force Toast Pod.
Do you guys have a new episode coming up, or just dropped an episode?
We'll have a new episode, I think, this coming week on Tuesday. I unfortunately have not gotten very far in Path of Vengeance and the new High Republic young adult novel. I'm behind, so we might talk about that a little bit, but we'll talk about some of the other news and things to take some of the time.
I think we should do a special segment, maybe the next show or the next couple of shows, where you take us through the chronology. Like if someone was to jump into the High Republic, what is the order to go in, and what are the characters to be focusing on? Maybe a little segment there where you take us through that. Laura teaches us about the High Republic.
I agree. And if you can make a PowerPoint presentation about it, like, in your
there will be slides.
Fantastic. All right, Kevin Smets, another fun show. And thanks so much for joining us again and for coming aboard full time, brother, man. Please let people know where they can find you and all you got going on Star Wars.
Yeah, at Kev Smets, you can see it right below here, and then at Scoundrels Inc., the show that I founded. I'm gonna actually get to be on this week, which is a good thing. Thanks. So, and also RevanTrilogy.com for all my KOTOR stuff. I was just telling Rocha off the air, like, got to get some more releases out there to keep that algorithm going as we're in production for another one. So I'm doing something ridiculous and rescoring the first KOTOR movie I did.
Wow.
But using, I'm going to pretend like I'm James Gunn, and it's going to have a lot of it's a Star Wars movie that's going to have like classic rock in it. So
needle drops. You're going to do needle drops.
Cool.
Wow.
It's literally going to be called KOTOR Awesome Mix Edition. And I kind of did a couple tests. It's ridiculous. It's stupid. I think I have a Billy Idol Moni Moni song during a speeder bike chase, which surprisingly works really well. So we'll see how that all pans out. And that's an exclusive, by the way, because I don't think I even announced why. I just sort of announced the logo. So that's coming out. But yeah, thanks for having me, man. I love talking Star Wars with you too. So it's been great.
Thank you. It's our blessing. All right, y'all take. Oh, as for me, you can follow me at The Rocha Says, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, The Outlaw Nation on Twitch. And I'll say this: go and follow me on The Outlaw Nation on Twitch, because I will be playing Jedi Survivor. I will crank my Twitch back up again and start playing with consistent hours. I've also gotten back into Ghost of Tsushima and been playing that like crazy late at night, staying up to 1 a.m, which I'm too old to do. But I am definitely going to do that with Jedi Survivor. So come and follow me there. And of course, all the other content we have here across the Outlaw Nation. Please come and subscribe to the channel down below and hit that bell button. Leave a comment and leave a like and let us know what you think about all of this, especially the End of the Empire debate that we had. What are your thoughts on it? Where do you think they're going to go? All right, y'all take care of yourselves. Be well. And Laura, what do we have to tell them?
We tell them to remember, until next time, your focus determines your reality.